Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm speaking with Dr. Alan Rosansky, a distinguished professor of medicine at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai and the Director of Nuclear Cardiology at Mount Sinai St. Dr. Rosansky has dedicated his career to advancing our understanding of health, vitality, and prevention through his comprehensive health model, the 6 domains of health. Today we'll dive into his model, the latest advances in heart disease treatment, and the role of preventative cardiology and lifestyle in maintaining lifelong wellness and aging well. Dr. Rosansky, thank you for joining us with the Aging Well podcast today. Let's just have you start off by telling our viewers and our listeners a little bit about yourself and how your journey has shaped your approach to health and vitality.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know whether to give you a short answer or a long answer, but
You can give us a long answer.
your long answer then. So I always wanted to be a doctor. I trained in cardiology and was taking all parts of it in. And near the end of my fellowship, we had a guy come in to spit on stress testing, exercise testing. And about 4 weeks before, he canceled. And the chief of cardiology came up to me and said, "I think you should give the Grand Rams." And I said, "Me? Are you kidding?" So I spent a month delving into everything you could read about exercise testing and started to just love that part of the literature. And I gave the talk, and the absorption of some material in depth really sometimes can transform you. So I then, from that point on, wanted to be a cardiologist who was involved with exercise and so forth. And that led to to finish my fellowship, to a subspecialty called nuclear cardiology, where we use radioisotopes to image either the blood flow or the wall motion of the heart while people perform exercise. And I was fascinated by this field. And so I got involved in that, and that became my early career. This is in the mid-'80s, there was data that came out that showed that when we put in ambulatory ECG monitor on patients who were cardiac patients, and then they went about their daily activities, we started to see these abnormalities in BKG, which measures what we call myocardial blood flow. You look at ischemia, lack of blood flow. We measured this while people were doing their daily activities, and we started to see that people were developing silent episodes of what we call ischemia, or lack of blood supply, while they were driving and doing other daily activities, and at low heart rates. And this was just so counterintuitive to what we understood about the physiology of ischemia. So I wanted to study this, and after thinking about it, I came up with the idea, let's look at patients under mental stress as well as exercise. So when you're looking at let's say the wall motion of the heart, and you're looking to see if they have heart disease, you image the heart, and if there is no significant blockage, as you exercise, the walls move more vigorously. But if you have a blockage in one of the coronary arteries, as you exercise, the wall starts to slow down or even stop moving. It's all controlled, so when we stop exercising, it all comes back. So we said, well, what happens during mental stress? So I talked to some physiologists or psychophysiologists how to do this, and said, you got to use multiple stressors. So we came up with the standard, like subtract CO7 as fast as you can, a kind of what was called the word Stroop task, which is another cognitive stressor. And then he said, and just ask me to talk about the stress in the lives. I said, just as that. Okay, fine. Second patient that we're doing was a guy, his name was Harry. I still won't say his last name, although he's no longer with us. And he was about to lose his job. And he starts talking about it and what it means to him. And we're imaging the heart. And then we look at the wall motion of the heart, and lo and behold, as he's talking about the stress, about half of his heart stopped moving. When we put him on a treadmill, it was the same half. But it occurred during the mental stress without chest pain at low heart rates, reproducing what we were seeing on the ambulatory ECG monitors. That was my aha moment. I just was stunned by that data. And it showed, hey, there is this relationship between the mind and the body, and it's real. And that began this 3-4 decade journey to look at what are the factors in terms of psychological factors and overall lifestyle factors which affect the heart and overall health. So that's been how my journey began.
That's fascinating. And as an exercise physiologist and somebody who teaches in an exercise science program, one thing that I've adopted over the last few years is stressing to my students that whatever interventions we're doing, they're biomechanical, psychosocial. It's not just simply the biological, the physiological, that we have to tie in more than just what's going on physiologically. And so that kind of brings me to your 6 domains of health. Could you give our viewers and listeners an overview of what these are? How did you develop this model? And what inspired you to focus on these specific domains?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, it isn't something I made up. I just followed the evidence. It wasn't overnight. It was progressive. So I started looking at the effects of acute stress and heart disease. And I was being invited to all of these conferences and finding out what other people were doing. And then I got attracted to this understanding that depression was another risk factor for heart disease. Now, if we say that in 2024, you say, oh, who doesn't know that? But in the 1980s, it was highly debated. People doubted it. But the data was coming out that when people were depressed, just about the whole physiology of the body went haywire. You had autonomic dysfunction, even your platelets are affected, you have insulin resistance, you develop visceral obesity, even the amygdala enlarges, you name it. So that was fascinating to me. So I began to look at what are the other factors besides depression that cause these things to happen. So under work stress, not thriving well after abuse and trauma, loneliness, these were other factors which were factors. So I was just focusing on that for 3 or 4 or 5 years, but then a couple influences started having me look at, well, what is the opposite of that? What are the positive factors that promote health? And so if something's healthy, if it promotes longevity, if it protects the physiology, you have less risk of chronic disease. And the opposite is unhealthy. So I came to realize, hey, the body is the testifier. Let's just look and classify this. So I came up with, well, there's really 6 main domains. There's the physical factors, exercise, resistance training, good sleep, all of that. Then there's the quality of your thinking. So we began to look at that, and you found that people who are optimistic live longer. They have less heart disease. Pessimists, the opposite. Gratitude's another factor. So there's a quality of thinking. Then the emotions, which I just mentioned, some positive emotions promote better health and greater risk for living longer and better. And depression's the opposite. That's the 3rd domain. The 4th domain, very powerful, is the quality of your social relationships. Even when you take social animals, and let's say you cynomolgus monkeys is a model which has been studied for many years, and you put them in cages, you put them under stress, experimental stress, they develop abnormalities in cardiovascular function, even cardiovascular disease. So that's the 4th. The 5th is one of my favorites, or maybe my favorite, which is your sense of the need to live purposefully. People have a strong sense of purpose. The data is clear. They live longer, they have less heart disease, and the opposite's true as well. And the 6th, interestingly, is how you manage stress. And here we find something interesting, that there's a U-shaped relationship, that we strive best with challenge that we're pursuing, and that both toxic stress and the lack of stress probably due to boredom are factors which you don't do as well with. So those are your 6 domains. Nothing I made up, but that I just studied over the years.
We've labeled them as pillars lately, and I've taught this in my pathophysiology and exercise class for years, that if you want to live long, be healthy, have a good health span, it's exercise, healthy diet, maintain a healthy body composition, good sleep hygiene, don't smoke, and have good, purposeful social connections. And so what you just listed in your 6 domains are very much what we try to highlight really here on the Aging Well podcast.
Exactly. Very good.
And so can you elaborate a little bit more on each of these domains and how they contribute to overall health and vitality?
Absolutely. Well, the thing I began to realize over time was, wow, seeing that these are 6 separate domains, but they have one thing in common. Each one of them promotes a sense of vitality. And being kind of a guy who's in research and all of that, I defined my terms. And then I came across this great definition of vitality back in the 1990s. I didn't make up the definition. I'm glad I didn't. It's always better when you can quote others who studied it. But vitality is that sense, that pleasurable sense of feeling energetic and it's energizing or it's activating. So we were saying it's pleasurable. The great tragedy is we take our vitality, our energy for granted until we don't. And when you have like a common cold and you feel really tired, the first day the cold breaks, you feel, we don't hold on to that feeling. We take it for granted. But unfortunately, many people, as they get older and their energy level goes down and they think, well, that's aging. And that's incorrect, by the way. But they start to cherish feeling that sense of energy. And it's pleasurable. Why is it activating? Because we have that soul drive to do meaningful things. So you give me, if that's functioning correctly, you're going to want to do things if you feel energetic. So each one of these 6 factors promotes vitality, and one leads to the other. And when one of them is where you're not functioning well, whether you're depressed, whether you're lonely, whether you're just poorly, etc., it starts to drag your vitality down and it starts to affect the other areas. So it's a very positive message because we have here what it says a vital sign for how you're doing, which is your sense of vitality. And that led me then, if I may, to something else, which is that something I've asked for many years. And I wonder if I could ask you a question.
Sure.
Okay. Now, how would you define health?
That's a good question. I mean, because I think the easy answer is the absence of disease, but I don't think that's health. I would say that it's having that purposeful vitality, that purpose and reason for living and not being dragged down. I tend to emphasize what I call well-centered fitness, which is I refer to as a balance between the spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social well-beings. And that it's this asymptote that we're trying to get to where it's that kind of perfect balance between them. And we never quite get to those. It's just that we're driving closer and closer. We're getting better in each of those and getting better at balancing each of those. And so for me, I think health is really where those key areas are in balance and we're not seeing our lives being brought down by ill health or poor emotional balance or bad relationships and those types of things. I don't know if that was a very good definition. But
That's very good. And you certainly filled in the details. So you're right that no one would logically say that health is just the absence of disease. What I'd point out is that our healthcare systems, and this is no knock on them, is it functions as if health is the absence of disease. And it does so because, well, the main thing we want is curative care, and that's a tremendous mission. And so that becomes the dominant mission. Okay, so it kind of functions that way because you could just say, look at where the reimbursements are. It's for the time you spend helping patients to get better, which is the first function of a physician. So I've been fascinated by, well, how do people answer this question? So I've asked many doctors, and I get answers all over the place. And then many people are not doctors as well. So the World Health Organization, and it was really brilliant, in 1948, they said that health is complete physical, social, and emotional well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. Why did they say the last part? Because they understood that's how we kind of think of health. But their definition is just an aphorism. It doesn't tell you what to do. So I came to realize after I was working with this model for a while, we got this perfect definition of health. Health is physical and psychological well-being and is associated with vitality. And it's a one-sentence definition, but now that gives you that vital sign, as I said. If your vitality level is down at any age, whether you're 20 or even if you're 88, 92, then look to see where in these 6 domains might you work to get your energy better back, so to speak.
So we might want to, in medicine, instead of referring to vital signs, maybe we should start referring to it as vitality signs. And maybe that would give us a little bit of a shift away from just the kind of more reactive care that we tend to have in medicine to the more preventative side and the more proactive side of health and medicine.
Yes, I think that's a good point.
So in your view, what are the most critical lifestyle adjustments that people can make in these domains to improve their longevity?
Well, I think you'd have to break down each one because that's a good answer, right? Because it means it gives you multiple areas to start. And I always say, start with the power of the first step. Where is an area you want to work on? But I would say to your answer, and I know you're an exercise physiologist, so you love my answer. You start by moving. It's like that's baseline. If you look at all of the physical factors, move. When you start to move, exercise is not just a physical factor thing, it's a spiritual thing. The data is enormous, right? I mean, when people exercise, one of the things that I think always, this point comes to mind with this, is that we as doctors, when we talk to patients, we promulgate exercise, right? You say, you'll have less heart disease, you'll have less risk of hypertension, you might live longer. But we're always talking to patients in the future tense. These are things that exercise will do for you in the future. And I think we have to emphasize it in the present tense. Exercise and you'll have more energy. You'll feel less depressed. You'll feel less anxious, less stressed. You'll have more energy and all those things. I think that's where we have to talk about. And so that's why I start with exercise. Even if I want to get to work with people on their diet, I really want to start with their exercising first. It's funny because once we strengthen ourselves in one area of our physicality, it makes it easier to do so in the other areas. So in terms of the physical factors, I would start with exercise. Now, you want me to move to the other?
Yeah, move on to all those domains. I'm really curious, kind of, what do you counsel your patients in as you talk about these 6 domains? What do you tell them? This is what you need to be working on in order to kind of bring these all into balance.
You're a good interviewer. It's just, okay, let's go through the 6 domains then. Okay, well, let's talk about the quality of your thought process. Really, I'll tell you, there's much you could say. Well, we published a meta-analysis on optimism about 5 years ago. We showed this data that people live longer with heart disease with optimism. So naturally, I got some newspaper interviews, and your question always was, well, what can we do about it? How can we be more optimistic? So I said, don't start there. It's like taking someone who's sedentary, and all of a sudden you're asking them to run a mile. And I said, but you know what you start with? With gratitude. That's available to everybody. And the data with gratitude is profound. We feel grateful. We have a greater context. Things rub off us more and so forth. But the big problem is we take it for granted, or we just provide lip service to it. Everybody hears it. Oh, yeah, it's good to be grateful. But you have to take it on as a value. I really want to turn myself into a grateful person. In other words, make it a mindset. Like any mindset, that requires work. It's a muscle that you have to develop. And there's different ways to do it. It could be a diary that you keep, or it could be one action you do a day or reflection at night. But you got to work on it. And I'd say it's the greatest tragedy of mankind that people don't work on it. Because once you do, you have that greater context in life where you handle stress better and you feel happier. So that's the second domain, quality of thinking. In terms of emotions, it's very wide-ranged, but, I would say that one of the things that really helps with the emotions, again, is exercise. I have a colleague, Jim Blumenthal, down at Duke, and he has been at the Duke Rehab Center, Cardiac Rehab Center for decades. And early in his career, he did this groundbreaking work with the NIH. He had 3 prospective randomized studies where he took people who were depressed and he randomized them to either an SSRI, antidepressant medication, or to an exercise training program. And they followed them over 12 weeks, and they found a similar decrease in depression in both groups of patients. I pointed out to Jim, I don't think it was just the exercise because they were in groups. So they're getting the social benefit and support as well. But you could see that our physicality affects our emotions, and our emotions affect physicality. Okay. Learning how to reframe better is a way you can deal with your emotions. I think that's a foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's something that people should learn as a skill. And that's the ability to see, gee, my thoughts and my interpretations are just my thoughts and interpretations. And they might reflect reality, but they might not. or just being able to be more flexible in your thinking. And because what happens when people are down is they're stuck in certain ways of thinking. So just practicing, well, is there another way to think about it? What I found is if you work with people and they're not good at it, if you just get them to start practicing reframing, and first it's maybe not so credible, but they just get into the practice, then it's okay. Now, what a more credible reframe, something that feels more true to you. And so they walk up the ladder, or that is a muscle, and they get better at that. And then they can learn to just catch themselves into thinking, because very often when we're down, it's because we got in a down cycle in our thoughts, but we didn't know we were having that cycle. That ability to just step out and just say, oh, that's me again, being anxious or being moody or whatever, and say, maybe there's another way I could be with this. Maybe I could do some jumping jacks. But there's many ways to deal with that. Okay, the fourth domain here is and I've never done this where I just went through the domains one by one. Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
What domain is in the social connectivity. So that's about, we all have this desire to be connected to other people in one way or another. The expression may be very different. Some people are extroverts, other introverts. Some people just need one good friend or two, other need to be among a lot of people. But we do need to feel that connection to other people. And it could take many forms. But the problem in our generation is we're so busy and we're so many things going on at one time that very often, one of the first things we can cut off is, I'll spend less time with my friends. And manana, I will get to it. Manana comes and it gets put off. And people just get into these very superficial relationships, which is very easy in our generation, right? But you have to invest in your friendships. And interestingly, you see what happens is that in your mid-years, when you're so busy building your career, you don't necessarily feel the lack so much. But when people, and your podcast is about aging successfully, but when people reach their older years, they want these quality social relationships. But if you didn't invest over the years, you're paying, it's a lot of catch-up. So that's the fourth domain. Sense of purpose. So many things to say about that. I could go in many directions, but I would say one thing is make sure your ladder is up against the right wall, because we could be doing many things and work very, very hard, but maybe that wasn't the best wall to climb. So how do you know what that is? So I talk about these turning fork moments that people have sometimes. There's something you did where you felt, wow, this is interesting. Things have stopped in time. You felt it was you and resonated. So that's like a clue. Hey, wait, maybe this is something about me that I ought to be doing. And if you can start to think about these moments, and anyone can just stop now and just say, wait, let me reflect on my life. What were those times in my life where that was true for me, where I got into some sort of flow, where I felt energized, where I felt this was me, that it just resonated? If you can look at that pattern, you can start to tell you, hey, wait, this is maybe the direction I need to go into. A lot about purposeful living in our generation is time management. We all have to be skilled managers of time. And many generations ago, that was maybe an important thing. Maybe it was learning how to use your time well. Today, we have so many ways that we can be creative and so forth, that you have to be disciplined and make sure that you're at your right direction, then you're not the pole. So there's many things I could say about that, and I'm able to respond to questions you might have on it. So the sixth domain here is stress management. Okay, so you're an exercise physiologist.
Right.
So people come to you and you're looking at your clients and you're checking out the muscles. One of the first things you might say to some of your clients is, your muscles are stiff. You got to work on stretching, but you're too tight. So one of the paradigms for health is flexibility. Flexibility is how the body keeps its homeostasis, the ability to respond flexibly. Well, it turns out that's true with stress management as well. One of the strengths of great stress management is what we call coping flexibility. And what does that mean to me is having a large repertoire of coping responses, high quality coping responses, and very important, being able to switch interchangeably from one to another. I emphasize this last point as a crucial point because what often happens is when we're under stress, we gravitate back to our most fixed ways of responding, which often aren't our best ways. So you have to work with that and make the new repertoire that you want to have. Home base, got to work on it. So it's a lifelong thing to always work on increasing your coping flexibility, the quality of your responses. And this could be many different things for many different people. I'm a big believer in all of the things we do to stress relax. When I ran a cardiac rehab program years ago, and we took on a psychologist, and she was very big in biofeedback. So I got this free biofeedback training, and that led to this progressive relaxation training. I learned how to put myself in a deep state of relaxation just with progressive muscle relaxation and no specific mindfulness within minutes. And I've used that the rest of my life. So that's one response out of 20 different coping mechanisms or more that I have and that people should have.
When I worked in corporate fitness many years ago, there was a gentleman in the program who, when you approached him on the treadmill to take blood pressure, check heart rate and stuff, you had to be very careful and walk up slowly and kind of slowly make your presence known because he would get into such a zone there. He was like walking on the beach somewhere. And in his brain, that's where he was at. And if he disturbed that, it was like a sudden shock to his system. And I was always so impressed with his ability to just get that relaxed in the exercise and really just allow his body and his mind to just relax and release the stress that well. It was amazing.
Yes. Yes.
So let's shift kind of back to a little bit more in heart disease. You've witnessed a lot of changes in heart disease treatment over the years, I suspect. Can you talk about how treatment approaches have evolved and the current outlook for managing heart disease?
Sure. Back in the 1970s, and this was before I started training, heart disease was an epidemic in the 20th century. In fact, if you look at the data, let's say 1970, 3 times as many people were diagnosed with heart disease as opposed to cancer. So now today it's about neck, and it's neck and neck because we brought down the age-adjusted mortality from heart disease by some 70%. The same is also true for stroke. And that occurred through many advances in prevention and many advances in treatment. So angioplasty, bypass surgery, ablation of atrial fibrillation, all of these different medications we have for treating different risk factors, bringing down cholesterol with powerful medications, treating high blood pressure with powerful medications, treating diabetes now with 7 or 8 classes of medications, and even new medications now for obesity, right? I mean, this is an amazing advance. So we're always advancing. Interestingly, though, beginning in the 1980s, we had the onset of the obesity epidemic, which has tripled in 35 years. I mean, that's just an outstanding statistic, very depressing statistic. And with that has come in a diabetes epidemic. When I was training, we called type 2 diabetes adult onset diabetes because we didn't see it in children, but now we do. And the other one is this progressive decrease in physical activity. Now, if you look at the CDC data, it says, well, there hasn't been a decrease. About half of Americans are meeting physical guidelines and so forth. But below the surface, people are getting less incidental physical activity. And now there's data emerging that incidental physical activity is extremely important. Why I'm emphasizing this is that we have the low-hanging fruit, which we've captured. Let's treat the risk factor. A high-hanging fruit is how do we change the health behaviors that drive these risk factors? And those health behaviors are about exercise, resistance training, watching your weight, eating well, sleeping well. And here we're not doing well. In fact, in most of these factors, the environment has become more toxic, right? I mean, the diabetes, the obesity, these are from environmental factors in large part. So we've got a lot of work to do. So we've been very successful. And this relates to your mission in terms of aging well, because people remove the goalposts. Now we can keep people alive longer, even with many comorbidities. And it used to be maybe you were thinking about, well, how will I be in my 70s, late 70s, early 80s. Now you got to think about how will I be in my early 90s or at 100, right? I mean, you're seeing, Kissinger, right? He made it to 100, and more and more people, we say that. It's something to think about. But you know what I say is that when you're young, your health is a gift. When you're young, health is a gift. When you're old, health is an attainment. It's after your kind of. So we have a lot of work to do with making people healthier as they get older and addressing these behavioral risk factors, so to speak.
Yeah, one of the big challenges we talk a lot about is the role that community and government can play in reducing some of these barriers and obstacles that are in people's places, preventing them from getting fit and healthy. I mean, we address the obesity crisis, and it's easy to say, well, people are just lazy. They're not exercising enough. They're just eating crappy food. Well, if you can't get access to good food, you want to exercise, but you either don't know how, or you don't have access to it, or you don't live in a safe community, it becomes a significant barrier.
This is something I think about a great deal. I think any doctor should do that. And the question is, on some level, what level of intervention? Right? What level? So I'd focus it on the healthcare system level, because medical centers have become health system conglomerates. There have been a lot of hospitals which have joined together, and now they're big systems. And interestingly, when you look at these medical centers, now they don't call themselves that anymore. They call themselves health centers or healthcare centers. And in part, that's because of a recognition we have to be more concerned about the health of our communities. But I think the problem is that all of the reimbursement really follows for curative care. There's not enough money being put into the healthcare centers to say, look, we're going to give you this money, but prove to us that you're improving the actual behavioral health of your community. If we would start to put more money into that, I think the healthcare centers would be empowered and incentivized to do that. And that's a great level to start to affect our communities in the United States.
So what do you see as some of the most promising future advancements in cardiology that can further help kind of transform our health?
Wow, that's a very good question. I mean, the advances technically are amazing. I mean, when I look at, I'm also an imager I mentioned nuclear cardiology. And the imaging technique has exploded even in the last 10 years with these newer ways of doing these non-invasive coronary angiograms. And it gets better all the time, how we can quantify plaque instability and detect heart disease at earlier and earlier stages. So that's really great. I think we need a revolution in terms of the behavioral approaches. Like there's this whole, I don't know what you want to call it, technology. I don't know if that's the right word, motivational interviewing. Motivational interviewing came out of the addiction literature and addiction medical doctors who were thinking, how do we help these patients with addiction? And they came up with this whole way of approaching patients, which helps them to get motivated to change. So that's not in the forefront of medicine. It's not in the mainstream of medicine. This is the hard work that I believe we have to do.
Yeah, motivational interviewing is something that our program at Western Oregon, we've really focused on for our exercise science students. They actually take a course in motivation and adherence and in motivational interviewing with the intent of trying to get them better at being able to manage people's behaviors and support people in making the behavioral changes.
Sure. That's what we got to do. I would say probably 99% of doctors probably could not explain what motivation interviewing is. So we have work to do in that area.
Unfortunately, some of them probably do it, but they don't know that they're doing it.
Wow, that is absolutely true. I love that you said that. That is true. I think it's because a lot of motivation interviewing is affirming patients' efforts. Whatever you did was good. Understanding their ambivalence, catching the positive what they said and ignoring the negative what they said, reflecting it back to the patient, and working with them to develop a plan that the patient is confident they can do. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think a lot of doctors use a lot of the principles without knowing what it is. I've seen.
And so preventative cardiology has been a big part of your work. Why do you believe preventative measures and lifestyle changes are key to tackling these chronic conditions like hypertension, diabetes, and obesity? You kind of alluded to this a little bit. But
Well, it's the driver, right? The risk factors for hypertension include weight, being under stress, being prolate, the exercising. These are the drivers. It's like you talk about like the dam and the overflow of the dam, and you keep mopping up to the river creek, or let's take the faucet and the floor. And you're mopping up the floor, but the faucet's still on. Unless we deal with the beta risk factors, we're just in treatment mode. So another part of that is it's not just about prevention. It's about living well. It's like living with this vitality they talk about. So it's just not an issue of, this is why I think that my definition of health is so important, because it's not just about not living, about prevention, right? We said the best defense is an offense. What's the offense? The offense is I want to live with a lot of vitality. I want to be energetic, for the duration of my life. So it's these are the things that cause that. What I say actually is, think about living well in health becomes a byproduct. Okay. In other words, if you do the things that say, what's going to, live with a strong sense of purpose, feel connected to your friends. If you're feeling depressed, health behaviors go south. If you're feeling low, health behaviors seem to go south. That's just empiric evidence. Same with sense of life purpose. So there's great context here that the physical affects the psychological, and it's the opposite way too. It's bidirectional. So if you're just talking to people about do this and do that, and you're not looking at the holistic person and all the factors, then you're missing part of the formula, if you will, the menu of things that could help people.
So for those who may feel overwhelmed in making these lifestyle changes, what advice can you give on where to begin?
I talk all the time about the power of the first step. Which of these areas resonate with you, and then what's an initial step you can do? Because again, you're an exercise physiologist, that the kind of guidelines from the CDC, American Heart and so forth, is that people should get 150 minutes of exercise per week, which is like 30 minutes 5 times per week. But imagine saying that to a sedentary person. They're not going to reach that. One of the most profound principles in psychology is that of self-efficacy. People will only do what they think they can do. So what you want to do is get them that micro step, that initial step that they think they can do. In other words, what I say is go for psychological success, not aerobic success. We say get them on the playing sheet. Okay? So that could be as little as a 5-minute walk per day. And by the way, we say, oh, well, that's an easy step. No, it's not. Because that commitment to step beyond the line of my habitual way of thinking and whatever is not so simple. That's been my experience. But if you can get them on the playing field and then you start walking 5 minutes a day, there is a day that they walked 10 minutes and they saw it. There's another day they ran into a friend and they walked for 20 minutes. And then they said, oh, I can do a little bit more. Or maybe they start to walk with a friend because they like it. And that's how you do it. That's how you do it.
So really fast-paced world we're living in, many of us struggle with unhealthy environments. It's all around us: processed food, sedentary jobs, chronic stress. What practical steps do you suggest for creating a more healthier personal environment?
You have to, again, identify each of these 6 areas and say, what would it be in this area or that area? It could be in terms of quality of thinking. Let me hang out with one of my good-natured friends, humorous friends, upbeat friends. We're affected by the people we hang around. So that's a simple step there. It happened to me, I just was writing a post this morning. There was a study came out about people who, when you sit in the workplace all day long, we know that sitting is bad, chronic prolonged sitting. So they found that if you intersperse with you standing up during the day, you essentially ablated the risk associated with prolonged sitting. In this one study, it was in JAMA Network, published January of this year. So I wrote a post about that. And I said, yeah, but they don't sell it as easy because our sitting habits are habitual. So what do I say? Put the printer farther away, put the garbage pail where you can't reach it, put the cooler where you have to walk to the other end of the office, use a timer, make an implementation intention, which is a if-when, like if I'm having my coffee, then I'll stand or stand up. I had the coffee, I should say. And so you use these environmental things that you create in your own environment for yourself. So it starts on the micro level. When you take whatever it is you're going to work on, and I love your question because if we can make things more habitual, environmental friendly, whatever we're working on, then it works. Then it works. Yes.
Okay, well, now's the time for the question we ask of all our guests. What are you doing personally to age well?
That's a good question. Well, of course, I'm exercising. Do this stuff, and I try to have a good diet. And those are like foundations for anybody. But I would say that two things come to mind that are key, which is that everybody should be waking up for the rest of their life with that sense of, I have things to do today. We take it for granted. We're working, you're working, I'm working. You wake up and you've got to think about, how do I get this or that done for the day? But we take that gift of having something to do for granted. There was a study done by the MacArthur Foundation years ago on successful aging, by the way, in which they asked people, older people, over the age of 65, I should say. So we're not really call them older anymore, right? That's the beginning of middle age. But they asked them how useful they felt. And the data was stunning. When people answered they don't feel useful, they had a much greater risk in the next 30 years of premature mortality. So having that sense of purpose, that's key. But the other one I think that people ignore is the ability to think young. In other words, there is this notion as we get older, well, I'm too old for this, I'm too old for that. And it's true, as you're getting older, there are things you can't do as when younger, but the thinking should not be that I'm too old for this. Push yourself and think young. Thinking young is thinking optimistically. It's a sense of adventure. It's a sense of curiosity. So you stay young by thinking.
Was there anything we've missed in today's conversation? How can our listeners and viewers connect with you, learn more about you? Do you have a website, social media, any of those things?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and I actually have a new website I'm just developing, but it's there, and it will be populated soon under my name, Rosansky.
That's easy. Well, Dr. Rosansky, I really enjoyed this conversation today. It was truly informative. I learned a lot, and it's stuff I feel like I'm going to take into class next week. And I do this often with the interviews that I do. I go into class the next week and say, oh, I was talking to this person over the weekend and this and that. And so there's just a lot I can glean from this. And I'm looking forward to kind of listening back to it as I edit and prepare it for publication. But I trust our listeners are now much more prepared to take better care of their cardiovascular health. I just thank you for the work that you do, and just keep doing it and keep aging well.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.